Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Whatever the case is for all of you out there listening across the world, welcome to Vestiges After Dark. This is Bishop Bryan Ouellette, your host, with co-host Joy Keeling on this August 10th, 2018, coming to you live from the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. Tonight we're talking about spiritual protection and what to do when things go wrong. It's a show you're not going to want to miss. Stay tuned, everyone. Everyone, and thank you for joining me tonight on Vestiges Vestiges After Dark. My goodness, I'm thinking it's the afternoon, Joy. I must be my brain must be on vacation. It's been too busy a day. How are you tonight, though, Joy?
I'm doing very well tonight. I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it, too. It's definitely a subject that I think we've needed to cover for some time now. We've had previous episodes in the past on the subject, but nothing that ever really gave it the level of detail we're going to give tonight, mostly because the subject comes up almost daily on Twitter, and I do try to make this show or tailor this show for those followers on Twitter that are, regular participants in all of the tweet activity that I try to do throughout the day. And so, it's going to be, I think, a very pertinent show. And we have tonight a top 10 list, and we're going to count down from 10 to 1. And I have ranked these in what I feel are the they're all important, but from the least important all the way down to the most important, number one being the most important thing that you can do. And we're going to see how it goes. And, of course, as usual, we'll be taking questions from Twitter or answering questions from Twitter and then live in the live chat room on Spreaker. So if you're not listening directly on Spreaker, there's many ways that you can be listening. Even at Nicholean.org, the church's website, there is a link there where you can listen. You could be listening on Twitter itself. The link posts immediately to Twitter when we go live. But by all means, set up a Spreaker account, and that's Spreaker. Set up a Spreaker account. It's free. You can use your Facebook to log in, I believe. And you can chat with us in the chat room and ask questions directly. Joy will be monitoring any questions coming in, and even if we don't get to them right away, she writes down the good ones, and then we answer them at the end of the show. And guess what, everybody? Sister Mary Joan is in the house tonight, so you can definitely you can definitely feel the energy when she walks into the virtual room, and that's always awesome. It's nice to have her with us. Welcome, Sister Mary Joan. And this is, I know, a topic that is meaningful to her as well. Doing the work that we do, spiritual protection is how we're able to do it. And so I think that there's very few people in the world that can give you the advice that we can regarding how to protect yourself and what to do when even the best protection fails, but also what you can do as a primary prevention strategy so that you can eliminate the risk to a certain degree. There's never any way to fully eliminate it, but one can eliminate the risk from spirit and demonic attachment. We'll be covering all of that tonight. Want to also mention that we are now on iHeartRadio, so if you want to tune in through that app, you can. All of the archives will be there for Vestiges of Christianity. Vestiges After Dark will probably show up or start showing up on iHeartRadio after about 6 episodes. It takes a while before they will accept a broadcast. It has to be something that's already had a consistent following. So Vestiges of Christianity are available there on iHeartRadio. Vestiges After Dark will be coming shortly once we have aired enough episodes for them to make it to iHeart. We're also, of course, on YouTube, and you can find the YouTube archive by going to Nicholean.org and just clicking on Radio Show Archives.
And Apple Podcast.
What's that?
And Apple Podcast. I don't know this one yet. You probably haven't signed this one up yet because it has to have a couple of episodes as well. But Vestiges of Christianity is definitely, that's how I'm subscribed to it. So it just automatically shows up on my phone. I
believe we are currently on iTunes because Vestiges After Dark falls under the Nicholean radio umbrella. So sometimes people are like, I can't find your podcast. How do I find it? Well, there's 2 things to do. Go to any of these platforms. YouTube. Go to iTunes. Go to, I believe, Google Play we have where people have told me that they found us there now too, and iHeartRadio. And go, or Spreaker, and go there and just simply type in either the name of the show, Vestiges After Dark, or Vestiges of Christianity, or type in Nicholean Radio. Sometimes it's filed under Nicholean Radio. Sometimes it's filed under Vestiges After Dark, or Vestiges of Christianity, depending upon the show. They both are on the same channel on Spreaker, so sometimes they get lumped together. And you'll know by the show logo, which one it is. Of course, it's basically an extension of the same concept. Just Vestiges After Dark is a little bit more edgy and a little less churchy. Although tonight we're going to get a little churchy, so forgive me for that. It's unavoidable in this.
This is one of those things where people don't mind you getting a bit churchy.
That's true. And I think, most of the people that follow me know what to expect. I mean, you are following an exorcist bishop after all. I can only be so avant-garde, and I'm actually quite a traditionalist deep down. I do have my unconventional aspects, and certainly my students know that better than anyone. But honestly, I'm a traditionalist, and I do, value the old ways of old-time religion and Catholic faith. So you're going to get a little bit of that tonight, but I promise not to be too extreme, or I won't I won't be a little, I won't be too preachy about it. But let's get started here, because it's really, I think, I want to give the topic the time that it deserves, and I also want to be able to get to some questions if we have the time for that as well. We'll also be taking a break at the top of the hour, so we have to factor that in as well. But let's start with number 10. Okay, so again, this is a top 10 countdown, and we're going to go from least important to most important. However, all of them are important, so you really should be paying attention to each and every one of these. Don't think because, that was number 10, I can forget about that one. That's what I'm trying to imply here, because no, that's not at all what I'm trying to imply. All right, so let's go ahead, get started here. So number 10, okay? Number 10 on our top 10 countdown of things to do to protect yourself spiritually from spiritual attachment as well as demonic attachment. Okay, so we're going to cover both. We might have to separate them into categories for certain parts of this because demonic attachment is very different in many ways from spirit attachment. Even though many Christians like to lump them in one, they're not the same. And again, that's a good thing for a show like this because it's important to understand the metaphysics of what's really going on out there. So many of the people that follow me or listen to this show are paranormal investigators themselves, maybe on an amateur level, but they do it. And, I'm not here to tell them not to do it, but I am here to tell them the risks involved in what they are doing. And certainly, I think sometimes the more you tell them about the risks, the more eager they are to do it because there are many people out there that are adrenaline junkies, and this is one of the ways in which they satisfy that craving. And there's risk to this, so the more risk you tell them, the more that they're excited to do it. Kind of like, people that like to rock climb without protective gear. It's kind of the same sort of thing. So I'm not here to tell you not to do it. I'm just here to tell you what the risks are and what you can do to minimize those risks. Okay, so number 10. Maintain a healthy lifestyle physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And by what I mean by healthy lifestyle is all of the things that you would expect in a very conventional way to this. Okay? So physically, you should be exercising and be physically fit for everything that you do in life. The more healthy your body is, particularly against, conventional diseases, so a healthy and strong immune system, the better you're going to be spiritually to ward off any kind of spiritual attack if it comes your way. And it can come after anybody. You could be at the wrong place at the wrong time. A lot of people think that you have to be doing something wrong. But in reality, it's not about so much. I mean, it is to a certain extent doing things that you shouldn't be doing. But it can also be just being in the wrong place at the wrong time and of no fault of your own. So having a strong immune system physically actually permeates into the rest of your beingness. So I always tell people before they go on paranormal investigations, I tell my own team before we handle a case, always consume at least 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C, take a vitamin B complex, and eat well, particularly the night before. A lot of people say, we should fast, we should fast, because there's this notion of fasting before an exorcism and all of these spiritual exercises. Do not fast. That's the worst thing you can do because you need your energy. I never fast before an exorcism. That would be stupid for me to do so. Not smart practice. You can fast after it's all said and done if you want to reacclimate yourself and recenter yourself, but not when you're in the midst of a risky situation spiritually, and certainly for just the rest of your life. It's just a good practice to get into. And that leads us to the mentally and emotionally aspects of it. So understand that spirit attachment, 99.9% of the time, is going to come from a weak emotional center. Okay? Now, we all have weak moments. Okay? So our emotional center is never going to be 100% all of the time. So understand that when you are emotionally vulnerable, you are spiritually vulnerable. Okay? That's a big thing to keep in mind. People that are overly emotional should not do this work, should not be doing paranormal investigations, should not be playing around with the occult, should really be living as conventional and boring a lifestyle as possible.
That's not going to happen.
Well, see, the thing is that the people that are interested in this tend to be the more emotionally, or the higher emotional types. And, high emotion doesn't necessarily mean you're emotionally vulnerable, but it can be one step away from that. So we want to make sure that, before you are ever going to put yourself into harm's way spiritually, that, you've got your emotions under control. Okay. Absolutely necessary to being spiritually fit. Mentally, just as important. Okay. Any kind of psychological weakness, be it depression, anxiety, substance abuse, going to leave you vulnerable. And those are risk factors, huge risk factors. In fact, we see that more than anything else. I mean, honestly, the big question we get, and we've covered it so many times, I'm almost starting to sound like a broken record. But honestly, when a person is psychologically compromised, they have a mental illness, it's conventional, it's diagnosed in all of the conventional ways. Maybe they're even on psychotropic medication for it. They are more vulnerable to spirit attachment than a person who is psychologically well. Okay, so that tends to be some of the ambiguity between a demonic event, a genuine demonic event, and whether or not a person is just psychologically ill. People ask me all the time, how do you know? Well, honestly, it doesn't matter as much as you think, because both always coincide with each other. A person is never going to be genuinely demonically afflicted without psychological consequences. And psychological vulnerability very often ends up in some type of spirit attachment. Hopefully not demonic, but it can, and it does, and we need to be aware of that. So all of those aspects are important. Lastly, spiritually, what can you do about that? Well, strong spiritual foundation is also necessary. You should be, I always tell people in pastoral counseling, I tell people in my congregation when I give a sermon at church, if you are praying less than 2 hours a day, you're not praying anywhere nearly enough. Okay? So the way that you keep yourself spiritually fit is not terribly unlike how you would keep yourself physically fit. So for physical fitness, you might exercise for an hour to an hour and a half a day, maybe even 2 hours a day. And spiritually, you would do the same, only with actual prayer. Now, I'm seeing this question come up a couple times in the chat room, and I just want to cover it real quick. Asking about taking callers. We have, and we do take callers. We actually have a number for this show. Unfortunately, Skype has been giving us trouble with it. And the first time and the second time and the third time we tried it, Skype just did not like it. And it really turned into a big fiasco on the air, and I really kind of want to avoid that. However, maybe towards the end of the show, if we're feeling daring, we'll take some callers, okay? So stay with us to the end of the show, and I'll give the number at the end of the show, and we'll try maybe taking a caller or two, see how it goes. Skype is not friendly to at least the current incarnation of Skype. If you want to do something for me, contact Skype and let them know. We need the ability to control all of the callers that call into a conference. Yeah. I don't understand why they don't have that already. But when you release a call in Skype, it releases everybody. So I lose Joy too. And she's not here with me in the studio. She is at home in Denver. And, we don't want to lose, her. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. We'll try it out again. I think we'll get a better connection. We might be able to try it. So, yes, we do take callers. We're still working on it. Okay. So that's number 10.
Oh, and I wanted to also interject about, there are a lot of people who are empaths or emotionally sensitive, and they want to use that ability while investigating, and that's great. That's why you need to be healthy. That's why you need to be on your game and in control of your own emotions. Because when you're picking up the emotions of another entity, you need to be able to differentiate between yours and theirs. And you need to make sure that you're secure, because otherwise you don't know what you're picking up.
And, that's such an important thing to consider in every aspect, and I mean, we're talking largely to people who go looking for spiritual activity and paranormal investigation and things of that nature. But that's a good thing to keep in mind no matter what, because you just never know. As you'll see as we go through this countdown, you just never know when you're going to come in contact with something that could eventually attach itself to you. It happens more often than you think. And honestly, I would say that every single one of us will have a spirit attachment at least once in their lifetime. Probably many more times than one time. It's usually not a strong enough attachment to cause enough issue that you would seek out a person like me. Number 9. If you give a spirit an inch, they'll take a mile almost every single time. So this talks directly to those individuals who are looking for various types of paranormal activity. They're interested in this subject. They want to work with it. And they're fascinated by the paranormal. So one of the problems with this fascination is that when you go looking for it, you're inviting it into your life, okay, by virtue of the actual interest. So by doing this, you're giving license to almost anything, and you don't always really know what's out there, and many times you don't. You don't know exactly what you're getting yourself into. You might hear of a location being haunted. You might, go to some particular place that is well known for activity, and you might suspect that it has something there, but you don't necessarily know what level of activity that is or what kind of spirit it might be. So with that in mind, you have to keep always one step ahead of whatever it is you're encountering. Always. Never give it the upper hand. Okay, so when you go into a situation and you invite them to speak with you, I know that one thing I see a lot in amateur investigators, I've even had it on my own team. I've had to actually release people for this. They will say, use my energy. Now, no. Yeah, never do that. Now, a professional investigator might do that when they know what they're dealing with, because there are certain circumstances where you have a particular individual who has passed on, who is deteriorating. I mean, we've discussed the nature of the afterlife in the past. We've discussed the nature of where ghosts are, how ghosts manifest, and what is actually happening to them, which is essentially, if you've listened to those past episodes, you know that there is a deterioration, a decomposition of the spiritual nature. So that decomposition factor makes them weak and increasingly weakens them to a point where their energy is almost so nil that they are not able to really manifest anything or even make themselves known to you. So they can use your energy, and that will sometimes help to gain access to the information that you need to help them. And so in those types of circumstances, a professional like myself might offer such a thing. But generally speaking, you never do this. Okay, leave this particular thing to the professionals. Don't do it yourself. And honestly, if you think you're experienced, and I know a lot of people think they're more experienced than they are. They might have been doing it for a very long time. And by amateur, I don't mean this as a disparaging term. I mean it in the sense that you're not doing this on a professional level. You're not getting paid to do it. You're not working with a church to do it. You're not on an actual exorcist team or in some other capacity. So that's what I mean by amateur. I don't mean amateur in the sense that you don't know what you're doing. I mean amateur in the sense that you're not doing this on a professional level where this is literally all you do. And when that's the case, don't take chances. Don't risk it. Okay. So that's number 9. Joy, do you have anything to comment on that? I know that you've experienced a lot in your own investigations, and I don't know if you've encountered how quickly they latch on to somebody who's willing to give everything to them.
Yeah, because that was something I did, at first, trying to encourage, spirits that I could tell, I was getting some kind of, human residue that wasn't able to communicate. It was just barely able to, I was barely able to even tell it was there. But, things like that have a tendency to stick, like chewing gum to the bottom of your shoe. And it just doesn't want to go away. And so you feel that residue, that whatever that was, that fear or that anger or whatever it was, and you don't know what it is because it's just such a generalized thing. But because you gave it your energy, it gave you its energy. And so if you give it power, if you want power over it, then you have to give it power over you. And I don't like that idea. No. I've done that. It's a dumb idea. It's bad. Don't do that.
It's typically it goes poorly more often than not. And since you don't know what you're dealing with when you go into a new situation, and if you ever encounter something, like let's say you're just in your home and you've never had disturbances before, but all of a sudden now things are coming through. The fact of the matter is, however you look at it, however you break it down, you're still putting yourself at risk anytime you try to make contact with anything that could be in your environment, even if it's your own home. I have people on my team that will never even use paranormal equipment in their home because they know that paranormal equipment does draw activity to the location where it's being used. And they don't want that in their house. But even without doing that, anybody could have a disturbance. Anybody. You don't need to live in a haunted house. You don't need to be on a haunted location. Those things definitely don't help. But, you could be in a perfectly neutral location and all of a sudden start having activity. You don't know why. Well, something came through. Maybe you brought something home. You didn't know it. But I like the chewing gum analogy. It's a lot like that. And it's kind of almost like getting chewing gum in your hair. It's you almost have to cut a part of yourself away in order to be completely rid of it. So, be careful with that type of thing. Okay, number 8. When attacked, put your faith in God and don't go it alone. So this is for when maybe you've done your best, maybe you haven't done your best, but whatever the case is, you were attacked, and now you've got an issue. I get this so often. People don't know how they were attacked, why they were attacked, and then they don't know what to do about it. And they expect me to give them advice over Twitter as to how to get rid of it. It doesn't work that way. There's more than 1,000 possibilities, and there's more than 1,000 solutions. Okay, so there's no way to cover every one of them. Professional investigation and assessment is necessary in order to isolate the nature of the attachment and draft a treatment plan for resolving it. It's just like going to the doctor, folks. Just like going to the doctor. Okay? You don't self-diagnose. You don't tell the doctor how to do his job. You're going there for the professional skill that he has to help you overcome your illness and hopefully receive treatment that will allow that to happen, or at least facilitate an experience of feeling better at some point soon. And the same thing goes for going to an exorcist. So when you're attacked, you got to put your faith in God and then seek out the correct help. In this case, I'm going to sound churchy, but in this case, going to the church is going to be your best bet for a few reasons. Number one, the Roman Catholic Church has more experience with this type of thing than any other institution. They do, by virtue of what they have done, what they are, philosophically, ideologically. They have more skill and more experience in this. Not all independent Catholic churches do. Fortunately, the Nicholean Catholic tradition is very experienced in this as well. In some ways, it might even be more experienced than most Roman Catholic exorcists, just because of the access that we've had to certain sources of professional information. And I'll leave it at that. But overall, there is no substitute for putting your faith in God. There is no substitute for seeking out the help of the church if you are attacked and you can't get rid of it or it doesn't go away. You're not going to be able to get rid of it on your own unless it's a minor thing. And typically, you shouldn't even try. You really should go to a professional and get the help that you need in order to overcome the disturbance. I can't emphasize that enough. But it is something that we see often. People wanting some kind of, I don't know, some kind of strange solution. We sometimes get people who are not even religious people. See, this is the nature of the work. I think sometimes atheists and maybe to a certain extent certain agnostics or secular humanists look at this kind of ministry and laugh at it because they just think it's all ridiculous superstition, and just a way of almost exploiting mental illness. I've been accused of this by such people, such populations, because they are so hateful of religion. But the fact of the matter is, we get a good number of non-religious, non-spiritual, non-believing types that end up seeking help. We do. And those are the hardest ones to fix because, unfortunately, the thing that they need the most of, which is faith, is the thing they're ultimately lacking in. And remember, an exorcist is a facilitator. He's not a magician. He doesn't do the work for you. That work has to come from you ultimately. Sorry, Joy, go ahead.
It's one of those things where you think, this could potentially be a seed for them if they could take that opportunity. Because, of course, they didn't have faith. They didn't really believe that there was something that could attach to them. And so they went out there challenging something that they didn't understand. So that could be the spark they need to start that faith.
Yeah.
Of course, how many times does it turn out that way? Probably not very many, but for the few times that it does, praise God for that.
Yeah. Oh, well, absolutely. And all you can do is be there. I find that more often than not, my work as an exorcist is to just be present, to be available. And that's getting harder these days because of my public awareness, the public awareness of my work, and people know me now. So, the caseload is more than we have the resources to resolve. But, in reality, ultimately what people need is they need you to be available. They need you to be present. And I try to do that as much as I possibly can with each and every one of my clients. Some need more serious intervention than others. Some need more time than others. It just depends upon who they are and what their problem is. Like I said, there's 1,000 or more possible sources of the issue, and there's 1,000 or more solutions to it. So, yeah, put your faith in God. Don't be afraid to do so, because ultimately that's where your healing is going to come from. If you're ever going to find healing, it doesn't come from any other source. So that's a little churchy, but that had to be said. Number 7. Okay, this is going to be a tough one. We're going to have to spend a little bit of time on number 7 here, because this is going to be one that's going to, I think, pose some questions. Keep an eye on the chat room, Joy. I don't want to miss any. And I see there's a lot of activity there. I actually had to block someone who was being rude. We don't tolerate that, and don't come to my podcast and solicit your own. Are you really serious? Do you honestly think that that's appropriate behavior? You come in here, you criticize our methodology, and then you solicit your own show.
Yeah.
Good riddance. I don't need people like that here. Okay. Number 7. Brace yourself for this one.
Uh-oh.
Stay away as much as you possibly can. All right, there's your caveat. Stay away from hospitals, graveyards, funeral homes, prisons, psychiatric facilities, and fortune tellers. Okay? That's my personal list of what I have seen to be the number, or the not number one, but the I guess what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are the top 6 most active locations for picking up a spirit attachment.
Absolutely. I've known people who worked in hospitals, and in fact, that's once I get to doing my clinical pastoral education, I'm probably going to be working in a hospital myself, which is why I want to build up my strength before doing that, because working in a hospital where people have died and don't realize they're dead, that's going to be too dangerous for me to put myself in that situation right now. But if I build up my strength, then I'm going to be okay with it. I'll be able to, get that going. But, right now I'm kind of hobbling along, can't put a lot of weight on that ankle, but it's all right.
Yeah. And I think you'll get there. I mean, there's no question about that. But, I mean, you take it seriously. And see, I wish more people were like you, in the sense that you take it seriously. You take the risks seriously. Everyone thinks I think a lot of people get into it because they want to be convinced. They kind of think it's possible. They're not really sure. They start getting into the occult or paranormal investigation just to kind of see if they can be convinced. And that's really a very poor reason for getting involved in these things. But furthermore, it puts you in a state where you're not taking it seriously. You're not putting the type of concentration into it that you really need to in order to protect yourself. And so, these locations, hospitals, there's so much death that goes on in a hospital, and usually it is quite traumatic, because a lot of people will unexpectedly die in hospitals. You go in for an operation, you think you're going to come out, you don't come out. That happens. Hopefully it doesn't happen too often. I don't know what the actual statistics are on that, but it does happen. And, that's a recipe for not crossing over, because what ends up happening is the trauma keeps you stuck. Remember, attachment, and Joy and I actually talked about this earlier this afternoon when we were preparing for the show. Attachment is a great term because it actually works. Both ways in which the word is used actually applies at the same level. Because you might say that a person who has attachments, like they're attached to their job, their possessions, their loved ones, their life, is what keeps them stuck. They can't let go. And so when they die, they're not ready for it. They don't die well They're not ready for moving on, and so they get lost and they get stuck. They get left behind in a way, and then the next thing they have to do is reattach to something else in order to continue their survival in this very dreary and confused state. And so that's where they will latch on to an individual who's ripe for being latched onto, and they drain their energy like a psychic vampire, if you will.
Oh,
can
definitely.
Make the living person very sick.
Yeah, and Tara and Daniel are talking about hospices. I was at a hospice about a year ago, and this person was not conscious when we arrived. I did sense him there, and I tried to communicate with him a little, but there were so many other spirits there trying to latch on to me because they wanted that energy. All they could see was bright energy, bright light, and they thought that maybe that was the light they were supposed to go to.
Yeah.
But no, that's me, and I'm a bug zapper. You need to back off.
And we're actually, we're going to, at number 5, let's hold that thought. Don't lose that thought, because we need to actually qualify it with number 5.
Nice.
Okay. Let's actually jump into that one. Let's jump into number 6, and then we'll get to number 5. One more thing I forgot to mention. We didn't even finish all of this. We talked about hospitals. Graveyards are obvious because, that's going to be where, in most scenarios, people get buried fairly quickly after even if they're cremated, it still remains. A lot of people think that cremation is different because, well, you don't have a decaying body in a box anymore. Now you've got this neat, clean, urn, beautiful silver or something urn of ashes, and they think that that's like something different. It still the remains. The attachment to, if a person's attached, they could still be attached to the ashes just as much as they could to their corpse. Ashes don't change anything. Cremation changes nothing. And so a lot of people are buried still, whether they're cremated or not, in graveyards. And, this process is efficient, particularly in the West. And so they could be very much still attached to their bodies before they have fully completed the dying process. And so graveyards tend to be unusually active for that reason. Funeral homes are, again, obvious because, that's where the embalming and all of these other traumatic things are taking place. Hospitals, I want to mention, not just dying on the operating table, but also, the autopsy, that is so common and so traumatic because most of the time you're still very much attached to your body for at least 3 days, minimally, after you have physically died. The spirit remains very much alive and connected to the remains. And can you imagine being put into a crematorium, still thinking you're alive, still thinking you're in there, but just not being able to move and not understanding why? Can you imagine having an autopsy performed on you? These are serious traumas. And that does definitely lead to spirits getting lost along the way from the trauma of their attachments. Prisons, because of the negativity and, of course, the untimely deaths, which are usually murders. And, of course, prisons tend to have facilities for handling people who even naturally die in a prison. And so there's kind of an activity there.
And even if they don't die there, just the trauma itself gets recorded in the environment.
Yes.
That energy stays. It lingers.
It does, whether or not the spirit is still alive or not. And remember, the body dies. Again, you have to go back to the past podcasts on this. But the body dies, starts the decomposition process almost immediately. And then the spirit, after about 3 or 4 days, starts to begin its own decomposition process. But the energy that made up what it was remains. And if it gets stuck even if it decomposes here, it's kind of like it's like a residual essence that permanently becomes part of the structure of wherever it is that it got stuck. And so a hospital, prison, these are places where that energy really becomes one with the building, which is why you have hauntings. This is honestly, this is how hauntings happen more often than not. It's not even a real active spirit. This is why you have sometimes intelligent hauntings, where you can collect EVP and get into real life conversation. And then you have what seem like these almost like replays, where where the spirit just keeps replaying a moment over and over and over again.
Residual energy.
Residual haunting, right. That's residual haunting is really not the spirit. It's just a shadow impression from
the stone tape.
Yeah. Kind of
just
like
replaying.
Yeah, exactly. Just the tape, just the reflection, but there's nothing really there. It's not even really a haunting in the true sense. Psychiatric facilities, because of the emotional and psychological instability, and because sometimes people do even die in those facilities as well. And then you might say, what about fortune tellers? Well, I'll tell you right now, most fortune tellers have more attachments than you could ever possibly imagine. Not because fortune tellers are evil people and they're doing these terrible things, reading tarot cards and the Bible says don't do it. That's not why. The reason is that for a fortune teller, a legitimate one at least, or even somebody who's might not be legitimate but is trying to be legitimate, what they're going to do, okay, is they have to open themselves up to everybody that comes in there in order to make the connection, which is a psychic connection by virtue of the very work that they're doing. So there's an exchange of energy, regardless, just by virtue of what it is. And most people are not going to fortune tellers because, it's fun and entertaining, maybe at fairs or things like that, or maybe on walkthroughs and tourist areas. Maybe those tend to be less, to a lesser extent. But most of the time when people seek out a psychic, it's because they're having some kind of problem. And in many ways, their problems are spiritual in nature. And so the psychic ends up participating in the spiritual illness almost through a process of contracting the illness, like a disease. And that's all they're seeing all day long, taking in this energy from all these different people. And they pick up attachments left and right, and they don't know it, and they don't know how to deal with it. They really don't. Just because somebody, opened up a shop, had the money to open up a shop and, lays tarot cards down on a table, doesn't mean they know what they're doing. And most of the time they don't. Most of the time people make it up as they go along. Trust me on this one, okay? Because I've studied it. I've studied it for years, more than we're coming up on 30 years. I've been at this a long time. And one last thing I want to mention is even the natural environment can be risky, particularly places that are isolated, like forests, caves, grottos, mountains. These are places where natural spirits tend to roam, and they can also latch on to you and make you sick. Okay, so it's not even a matter of okay, well, you have to go to the hospital, so what do you need to do to protect yourself? So you go through this process, and hopefully you're following this top 10 list here. Hopefully, you are actually doing what the steps that you need to protect yourself before you go into a place like a hospital, or if you need to go to a graveyard because of a funeral, or if you have to go to the funeral home for whatever reason because a family member, God forbid, died, or even worse, you end up in prison because maybe you committed a crime, maybe you were wrongly accused, but you ended up there. All of these things could be extremely risky locations. But yes, even the natural environment can be risky. And so anytime you're going into an environment that has a larger proclivity or a higher proclivity towards spiritual activity, you need to be prepared for that. So yes, the natural environment where there isn't much human activity tends to be more active. Don't believe me? Go camping in the middle of a forest. Go out, like hike out 2, 3, 4 hours into the forest where there's nothing, no one. And just be by yourself. Don't take anyone with you. Just go out there by yourself. Maybe a tent.
It's a great feeling out there.
It is. But, when nighttime comes, I guarantee you things will approach. And they're not animals.
No. We used to go camping a lot, actually, around Knoxville.
Yeah.
So I used to go camping around like Knoxville and even down by Chattanooga, all through the Smoky Mountain National Park. That was our go-to. And
Nice.
I loved just sitting outside at night because something about that energy really resonated with me. I haven't been to the mountains here at night, but I have a feeling I'm going to make my way up there at some point.
Good.
Just to see what it's about. But, taking it cautiously, of course.
Of course. And, like I said, a lot of people might think that they might do something like this. And this is why I mention it, because they might do something like this for spiritual renewal. Maybe they've done it, for 10 years, and it's always been a positive experience. Doesn't mean you could not come into contact with something that's malevolent. Not all things are demonic in a fallen angel sense. We've dealt with that on this show before as well. But there are a lot of dark spirits out there that can really amount to the same thing. So being mindful of this, not saying don't go camping, certainly not saying that at all to anyone out there who's listening. Just telling you these are things where activity can be stronger. Okay. I like what Sister Mary Joan mentions here. Always give honor to the elemental nature spirits. So like when you enter into an environment where they tend to be, give honor. Ask permission.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things I always try to do when I'm out in nature, because, of course, I haven't always been Christian. I spent some time as a pagan, and I was big on fairies and nature spirits. And so I loved going out into nature and trying to commune with the more benevolent of the spirits. I knew some of them weren't always, and I went to some places that were kind of dark nature. The nature there had been distorted, usually by man, performing rituals that should not have been done there. But there's always something there that I can communicate with, and I try to convey respect whenever I go, because I want my stay to be as pleasant as possible.
Yeah.
And not take them home with me, because there's plenty at home as it is.
Yes. And there are, there's plenty everywhere, actually. I mean, everywhere is really haunted. The only thing that we, would lead us to start to classify a place as legitimately haunted is because the spiritual activity has become so concentrated that now even an average, normal, person who's not particularly sensitive to this thing becomes aware of it. And that's when we would start to say a place is haunted. But in reality, there's spirits everywhere. They're passing through everywhere. And, just knowing that, it should be enough to say you need to be on guard. You need to be mindful. I like what Sister Mary Jones says there. Ask permission. Go into the forest. Ask permission of the spirits that live there if it's okay. Go into a cave. Ask permission. Don't just intrude upon their space, because there are spirits that live there, and you don't.
And then, of course, there are people who ask permission and then just step right in. You got to wait for that answer.
You do have to wait for the answer.
And if you don't know how to hear that answer, then you shouldn't be asking.
I have to agree with that. I do have to agree with that. Maybe we have to do a show on how to get your answer and what to look for.
Yeah.
But most people that are understanding what we're saying are already somewhat in tune with that. So, yeah. And, if you ask permission, they'll leave you alone. Assuming you got the permission. They'll leave you alone. You won't have to worry about it at that point. In fact, it might even be a very positive, beneficial experience to you.
Usually what ends up happening is if something shows up, and if I'm going out and doing something that's spiritual in nature anyway, something negative is going to show up, going to try to attack me. They not only allow me to be there, but then they protect me.
Yeah. And they will, because the spirits that are positively charged to that location will keep away those that could make a human being sick. They know. The more intelligent ones know. The more intelligent elementals. Not all elementals are intelligent. I mean, some of them have the spiritual intellect of what would be a mosquito on our level, but some are almost like dolphins or even human, maybe even beyond human. Like the jinn, for example, is a great representation of an elemental spirit that is more intelligent than a human being.
Yeah, definitely.
You never want to mess with a jinn. Never.
No. Not ever, ever, ever.
We actually had a client once that was had a jinn attached to them from Saudi Arabia. He lived in Saudi Arabia as a kid and went out into the desert by himself and was lost for 4 days. They thought he was dead. He came back, and he was truly possessed by this jinn. And unfortunately, he stopped working with us. So many of them do, and you can't help them once that happens. But so you got a large spectrum out there, just like you do of the animal kingdom. You got mosquitoes, you've got mice, you've got fish, you've got birds and cats, and all the way up to chimpanzees and dolphins and whales. Varying levels of function, varying levels of intellect, varying levels of spiritual sophistication. Same thing with the non-corporeal world. So be careful. All right, number 6. Let's get to number 6 before the top of the hour. We'll take our break after this one. If you don't really know what you are doing, don't participate in dangerous spiritual activities. If you have to ask the question, then you don't know what you're doing. Okay? So if what I just said there leaves you with you asking whether or not you are qualified, then by virtue of having to ask, you're not qualified. So don't do it. And what do I mean by participate in dangerous spiritual activities? Well, this gets us into the same old thing again. Ouija boards, divination, any kind of extreme meditation, even self-hypnosis to a certain extent, even regular hypnosis to a certain extent. Any kind of occult practices. Maybe not so much astrology or numerology. Some of those things tend to be more benign. But anything where you are interacting directly with the spiritual realm, where they have to produce a result for you, if you don't know what you're doing, you really shouldn't be messing with those things. Okay? Chrissy asks an interesting. Chrissy asks if anyone's really qualified. Yes, but few are. The qualifications would come from literally a dedication of lifetime of practice, or I should say, a lifetime of praxis. So you're talking now genuine shamans. I'm not talking people who go and read a book, read the Idiot's Guide to Shamanism at their Barnes and Noble, and now call themselves shaman because they've done a few things from the book. I'm not talking about that. That's not a shaman. I'm talking about a person who was born into a tribe and initiated by the tribal shaman into the rites to be prepared to take over that task when the shaman dies. That's a true shaman. Okay, that's a person who is well prepared and well skilled for dealing with things like divination and spirit communication. Okay, that is a level of sophistication and skill that literally requires giving your entire life over to it. It's not something you do as a hobby. It's not something that you just do for entertainment. It's a lifestyle. It's literally a sacrificial act. Giving up everything, money, status, family even, to go and take on the responsibilities of whatever that initiation requires of you.
It's basically the difference between saying, yeah, I'm a Buddhist, and really you're just a smelly hippie, or saying I'm a Buddhist and then joining a monastery and devoting your life to meditation.
Well, a lot of people get mad at me, Joy, when I criticize so-called Reiki masters. They will, they will say, "Oh, I'm a such and such degree Reiki master, and I studied under this person. I did all this," and I hate to break it to you, but there has only ever been one Reiki master. He was a Buddhist monk in Japan, and he taught his monks some of the techniques that he had learned through his meditation and direct observation. But unless you're going to go and move into that monastery and study under those same monks, you're no Reiki master. You're no Reiki anything. In fact, you're a risk to the people that you end up trying to use those techniques on. I actually had the unfortunate experience once before, when I was more stupid than I am today, where I had knew a guy in my place of work that was a so-called Reiki master, and I was having stomach issues. I've had chronic stomach issues for a while. They even thought it was like ulcerative colitis, or it resolved itself on its own. It turns out I was just eating poorly and I like to eat. You guys know I like to eat. You see me eat my pictures on Twitter and Facebook, and food is one of my hobbies. And so I was eating too much, too heavy, too spicy, whatever, and it was causing havoc on my digestive system. And so he knew about this, and so he said he wanted to work on me and fix it. I can tell you, he made me so damn sick that it took 3 years to recover from his little 15-minute Reiki session. Don't mess with that stuff unless you know what you're doing. And if you think you know what you're doing, you probably don't, because this stuff takes tremendous dedication and skill. Finding the right teachers, people who are truly qualified, not reading it in a book, not having a passing interest in it, literally giving your life over to it. You want to become a Reiki master? Go sell everything you have. Tell your family goodbye. Kiss your husbands or wives goodbye, your kids. Move to Japan. Join the monastery. And learn by the people who actually practice it. And do that for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Then come back and work on me. Then you can maybe call yourself a Reiki practitioner. I still would hesitate to call you a master. And I know that's going to anger a lot of people, because there's so many people. It seems like everybody and their mother is a Reiki master. But
lots of masters. What's below that? Does anyone ever talk about that level?
Nobody wants to admit to being in that level. See, it's an ego trip, I think, to some. But you're right. There is nobody below master. Honestly, it's ridiculous. I've even heard these seminars. You go for 2 weeks, you come out with a certificate that says, your name, Reiki master. I've seen it.
Wow.
It's sad. But unless you're willing to do those things, you really shouldn't be doing them. Okay, so take my advice on this one, and you won't go wrong. Anyway, we're going to take a break here. It's the top of the hour. We'll be right back after this. Stay tuned.
When I'm with you, I am able to keep pushing my limits, and all the drive that I have, well, I'm going the distance with you. I didn't know what I had till I knew what was missing, and everything that I dread, well, I built a resistance with you. Catch me when I fall, and I'll keep you on the ground. You were gone, I wish you'd stay. I could look at you for days. Time was well spent, that's when I knew that I need to spend my life here with you. glass that you've been broken too many times. But I'll be waiting to mend your wounds from all you've taken. But if we listen to each other, admit our mistakes, then I can show you who I am, because I'm not the same. I'm better with you. I'm better with you. I'm better with you. Catch me when I fall, and I'll keep you off the ground. That's when I knew that I need to spend my life here with you.
Welcome back, everyone, to Vestiges After Dark. We're getting ready for the second segment of this show, where we cover the last, the remaining 5 of our top 10 countdown of things to do for spiritual protection. Once again, this is Bishop Bryan Ouellette with my co-host Joy Keeling. We'll be back just in a moment. Don't go away. Okay, everybody, welcome back. And so we're going to now cover the remaining 5 and see where this takes us. And if we have any time at the end of this segment, we will take some questions or answer some questions. So number 5, and remember, Joy, I mentioned what you were talking about during number 7.
Yes, because I'm always a few slides ahead in class.
Always. It's your keen intuition working. always ahead. Always just like usually 2 slides ahead. Like you'll say something and it's on like slide. It's like we're on slide 5. It'll be on slide 7. Okay, so this one is number 5. If you consider yourself to be a medium, a psychic, or an empath, you must be extra careful. More so than anybody else. Even the mentally ill. Even the emotionally compromised. Being a medium, if you genuinely are, if you are a genuine psychic, if you are a genuine empath, okay, you are going to be at the greatest risk for spirit attachment. Just naturally, the way that you are. Not doing anything wrong. Just simply being who you are. And the reason for that is there's not a lot of training in our society for how to cultivate and master these skills, these extra senses, if you will. We naturally learn how to use our vision and our hearing, but ultimately, in order to do anything with our eyes and our ears, we have to learn things. So for utilizing our ears in a skillful way, we learn language, and language mostly develops naturally without having to really work or learn it. Unless you want to really speak intelligently, then you learn skills in grammar and punctuation, spelling, and all that comes later, and how to pronounce words correctly. But there isn't any such thing for being a medium or an empath. Okay? They don't teach you. Nobody teaches you how to tune it out, how to turn it on and off on command, use it when it's appropriate, when it's not, leave it behind. They don't teach these things. So most people who are genuinely in these categories, these populations, and there's a lot of them. Well, there are more empaths than you can possibly imagine. In fact, everybody is empathic. It's just, again, sort of like everywhere's haunted, but we only really use the term when a place is so concentrated that everyone can notice it. Same thing with like a medium or a psychic or an empath. We tend to only really classify people this way when their gifts are so sharp that it's impossible to ignore. But you got people that call themselves this and they're really not. They would like to be. Maybe they had an experience once, but ultimately everybody has the proclivity, and the more that you do or involve yourself with supernatural or spiritual things, the more sensitive you actually become. So you could be completely the last person on the planet to have empathic abilities, and if you were to just decide to take up a career in paranormal investigation on a professional level and do this every day for 10 years, I guarantee you're going to go from the least empathic person to one of the most empathic people just by virtue of the work. It's just the way it is. So now, Joy, I know that you have a lot of natural empathic ability.
Yeah.
How do how does this particular point resonate with you?
Oh boy, it's absolutely true. And what's really rough is because of your connection and the fact that, like in my case, I've been experiencing these things my entire life. My first memory was of seeing ghosts. And so I think I'm bigger than I am. I have a lot more bravado than I really should. And I end up getting my butt handed to me. But that's part of the problem is I know I have to be more on top of things than most of the people around me because of how sensitive I am.
Yeah.
And so I have to work harder, and I have to go get Eucharist daily. I have to keep that prayer going. I have to be on top of it because that's that's how I am controlling this. That's how I get my hand on it. That's how, and I let it, instead of letting it wield me, I wield it.
Yeah.
But you have to know how to do that. And a lot of people just let it run. And it's not about, you have to have control over it, and it's difficult to do because there aren't any schools. There's not any way to really educate yourself on how to do it better. You read a bunch of books and you think, well, I hope this will help me. Yeah. But building up that spiritual strength, going to church and participating in the sacraments, getting Eucharist regularly, praying the Rosary, all of those things are disciplines, and that discipline is what helps me get hold of my abilities and what I can do, so that I know I'm in control of that instead of the other way around.
And the other way around. Now, honestly, another barrier to this, I think, particularly for the conventional Christian, is that they might actually think or have been told that this gift is evil.
Yes. And the more you try to push that down and deny it because you've been told that your gifts are evil, you're able to see spirits that other people can't. You can hear them speaking, and you're told this is evil. This is something you need to deny, and so they have to push this away. And what that does is it's like repressing emotions. Eventually they're going to come back up, and it's going to be bigger than you ever thought, and it'll probably end up hurting you.
Yeah.
Because it can be really powerful when you're burying something that is that strong, that when it comes back up, it's going to explode. It's going to fester. It's going to get infected, and that pimple's going to pop.
Well, you were talking about, spirits, you're being like a beacon of light,
Yes.
We even talked earlier today about moths to a flame. They're going to be attracted to the brightest thing that they can see. And so, think of these individuals lost in limbo, not really fully understanding where they are or what they are. Remember, there's no intellection anymore. There's no consciousness as we understand it. The brain stays with the body, and the brain dies with the body. So our faculties of intelligence and reason are lost to the spirit after it loses its connection to the body and the body stops functioning. So they're not able to rationalize like we do. Okay? They behave more instinctually using the faculties of awareness that are inherent to the non-corporeal world itself, or the non-corporeal side of the cosmos itself. And that's all they've got to work with, which, as an individual isn't much. As a cosmos, it's pretty good. But as an individual, it doesn't really work out very well, because ultimately that's really part of the realization. We talk about things like crossing over. It makes it sound like you're going to another place. And, we talk about going to heaven, or is grandma in heaven, and we talk about it in terms of almost as if you're going on a destination. It has nothing to do with where you go. There's nowhere to go. And a lot of people misunderstand this when I mention this. I've had people that really got really upset about it when I said it a few weeks ago, talking about, actually probably more than a few months ago, about how there's no place to go. Heaven isn't somewhere else.
It's a state of being.
It's a state of being. It's a state of awareness. It's actually a state of awareness that you can cultivate right now. It won't be fully realized until it's been fully accomplished. But it is not somewhere out there in some other dimension or some other universe or something. It's right here, right now, right with you. And so these spirits are right here, right now, with us. But they don't have the knowledge that they had in life, because that is material that's contained within brain activity, not spirit activity. So what crossing over is, really, when we use that terminology, or we say going to heaven, what it really is realizing that you and God are one, and that there never was any division. The fall of Adam and Eve, I'm going to get really esoteric now, but it's worth it for this conversation.
Yeah.
the fall of Adam and Eve is thinking that we are separate from God. That's original sin. That's what caused original sin. If we want to get again.
What was the first question he asked? Where are you?
Yeah. Yeah.
We didn't lose God. We ran.
Yeah.
We
separated ourselves. We created a false barrier that did not exist and never existed. So realizing that ourselves and God are the same, not that I'm saying we are God. We're a fraction. God is what makes up the entirety of the divine life. We're just a little fraction of it, a little speck. But realizing that that speck belongs to the original flame and isn't some separate thing, doesn't come from somewhere else, isn't some individual, but an aspect of God itself, just a small particle of it, is what crossing over is. Once that's realized, you become absorbed into the divine reality. But until that's realized, you get stuck. So imagine being stuck, not knowing, not having your brain to think. So what you're going to do, you're going to look for what is most familiar to you. And the thing that you're going to look for is you're going to look for light in the darkness of limbo, the confusion of limbo. You're going to look for light. And mediums,
you're going to find yourself a medium.
Find yourself a medium, because that's what they are. They shine brighter than any one of us at the non-corporeal level. That's what makes them a medium. That's what a medium is.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so dangerous to bury your abilities if you're a medium, because you're still shining brightly, but you can't interact with that spirit at all. You can't tell it, hey, you're in the wrong spot. It's just going to latch on to you whether you want to or not, and you don't know how to fight it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So what was it you were telling me about becoming invisible?
Well, one of the skills that I like to teach some of our clients, and Sister Mary Joan mentioned it a little while ago in the chat room. I try to catch as much of the chat room as I can. She mentioned a little while ago that there are some schools or some people in the field are looking into establishing schools. And she also mentioned that a lot of our clients are sensitives themselves. And that's essentially what created the initial problem for them that caused them to seek our help. So one of the things that I need to do in those cases, and like I said at the beginning of the show, there's 1,000 possible problems and there's 1,000 possible solutions. One of those 1,000 or more even is to teach sensitives, mediums, empaths, whatever, to make themselves invisible on the non-corporeal level, because at the non-corporeal level, they're shining way too brightly. Here in the corporeal form that we all see as human beings, they just look like normal, average people most of the time. Maybe they're even insignificant. Maybe they go unnoticed. But on the spiritual plane, which is essentially a different vibration of the same place, kind of like the spectrum of color, we see red through indigo, but we can't see infrared, and we can't see ultraviolet or anything beyond that, X-rays and all of those other aspects of the light spectrum. But that doesn't mean that that those parts of the light spectrum are anywhere else. They're still here. It's just our eyes are designed to only pick up red through indigo. We don't see the other colors. We don't see the other aspects of light. Just that range of white light that's broken down into the various color spectrum. Same thing goes with spirits, okay, and the various resonances. So what we want to do is, for example, let's say a spirit sees in a particular frame or of that spectrum of non-corporeal experience, the medium is right smack in the middle of that. And quite honestly, the only thing that they can see. So that's what a medium is. That's what an empath really is, honestly. It's just somebody that shines far too bright at that level. And the way that we get them to get under control is to teach them how to make themselves invisible so that they can douse the light when they don't want to be bothered, turn it back on when they want to help. And mediums can be very helpful as long as they are skilled. They can be a nuisance at best or a disaster at worst working in the paranormal field when they don't have this under control. But one that has it under control can be very useful to a person like myself.
Definitely.
Yeah. So that's what I meant by that. We'll be probably talking about that on future episodes. So
Totally.
make sure that you listen every week. Okay. So number 4, utilize holy objects of power. Absolutely use such things. Now, in the Roman Catholic Church and in Catholicism itself, we have a lot of things called sacramentals. These are tools that contain or facilitate the expression of grace that's contained and conveyed and conferred in the 7 sacraments of the Church. They are crucifixes, medals like medals of the Virgin Mary, even icons and statues can be sacramentals. The blessed palms on Palm Sunday are sacramentals. Holy water is a sacramental. There is blessed oil, which is also can serve as a sacramental. Exercise salt, same thing. In fact, the holy water should be made with exercise salt. If it's just blessed, then it's not truly holy water. It's just blessed water. A lot of priests in the Roman Catholic Church, unfortunately, when they make holy water, they just say a very simple blessing. Some just do the sign of the cross over the water and leave it at that. That's not holy water. That's blessed water. It's better than nothing. But to make holy water, a priest, it has to be a priest or a bishop. No one, a deacon cannot do it. A layperson cannot do it. Has to perform the rite of consecrating holy water,
and it's an exorcism blessing, isn't it?
It is. It is. The exorcism is primarily on the salt, and then that salt is mixed with the water, and that produces true, genuine holy water. So, yes, we have our kits. Tara's talking about the kits that we had given out to those who gave a generous donation to the church, and we have been out of stock for a while. I believe our outreach office is almost ready to have a new updated kit available. It's going to be kind of a combination between the big one and the small one, kind of a new medium one. I'll let you guys know on Twitter when that's available, but that's something that you can use by all means. Those blessing kits, for those of you who have them, are wonderful. Now, you should be able to get holy water at any Roman Catholic church just by going in. One of these days, I will try to see if Sister Mary Joan will tell her very funny story about the first time she went to get some holy water, because I had not given her any, and she needed some. But we'll save that. See if she will tell the story, and we'll save it for the next time she is a guest on the show. But it's a very funny story, and it still has me giggling in the back of my mind anytime I think about it. But these are things that you can use to protect yourself. The sign of the cross, in fact, in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, that's a sacramental too. And these are all very powerful methods and systems for protection against these types of forces. Do you think the church created these things just for the hell of it? No. These were not established just for the sake of, remembrance of the various truths of Christianity. They were established as protections against the darkness within the fallen world, and it's all around us. There's demonic influence everywhere. The church has always understood this to be true, and so these tools help to defend us. The church militant is what we're called, those of us who are alive, fighting the good fight, working out our salvation. These tools are here to help us do that. So by all means, use them. Now, what about those of you who are not Christian? I know that we have some listeners that are not and perhaps don't find any kind of compatibility within that system. And, while that saddens me, I understand that happens. Sometimes it's a cultural thing. I mean, people. You don't necessarily, if you're raised in a religion, you don't want necessarily someone converting you out of it. So I can understand that. But every religion, the main ones, the big ones, all have various systems of their own for protecting you against spiritual force. Even Buddhism has a great plethora of options available, and things to do and things not to do, like the Tibetan prayer wheels. I'm sure you've seen those. It's been very much established belief within Vajrayana Buddhism that if you turn the prayer wheel clockwise, it releases blessings, but if you turn it counterclockwise, it releases demons.
Yes.
So don't be afraid to use these things. Don't think they're superstitions. I know some modern Protestant churches, evangelical establishments, Bible-only type of establishments have no use for it. Think it's all superstition. I even had, when you guys saw, if any of you saw Ogden Possession on Ghost Adventures, where I sealed the house with the 5 silver crosses. I put a cross in the Zach Bagans dug a hole for me, and I put a silver cross that was actual solid silver. I put that in the corners of the property with holy water and blessed salt, exercise salt and blessed oil, and then we buried it back, and then we took a 5th one and put it in the center of the house in a place where it could not be recovered. And that I was criticized. Somebody sent me a long email after that show aired and saying, you made it worse by doing this. This is all just Catholic superstition. And, honestly, it's kind of ridiculous because this is the Christian faith, folks. What anybody that would disagree with the use of holy water or crucifixes is a victim of the Protestant Reformation. And that's sad. Because
and I have to wonder, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I have to wonder if, do they believe in cursed items? Because a blessed item, the reason it's blessed is you have done something special to it to convey that spiritual essence to it. Yeah. It's not just, I said some nice words. No, you changed the vibration of that item by putting that blessing on it. It has the mark of God on it.
Yeah.
And it's designed for that purpose to, it agitates the spirits because you have to take care of it at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I bet you they do believe in cursed objects, because I know that even though evangelical Christians, I'm not trying to criticize anybody, but it needs to be said. It's a valid observation that I've made, not to be disparaging, but just to be honest. And because they are the group that tends to attack me the most. Evangelical Christians, will be the first to say that things like crucifixes and holy water is just antiquated superstition. But they're also the ones that are the most afraid of the devil. And so I guarantee you, Joy, that cursed objects are definitely something that they believe in. I'm sure they wouldn't. In fact, I know, because I've known evangelical Christians that won't even touch tarot decks for fear that it could convey a demon to them.
Absolutely.
And so it's like kind of hypocritical, on one level, to think that it could exist in an evil way, but not in a holy way. People are talking about the Ogden episode, I see. Yes. Yeah, that actually aired tonight, I think. I was told by some people.
Cool.
Yeah, it aired tonight. And it was a very interesting case.
Joe, did the silver play any role?
Yeah, Joe's asking, I know that silver is the most conductive of all metals. How does that tie in with the solid silver crosses you used in Ogden Possession? Well, they're the old superstition. Again, we'll talk about superstitions. That old superstition about how vampires, they can't do garlic. You can do the stake through the heart, and the silver bullets.
Silver.
And I think silver bullets were more for like the werewolves, weren't they?
Well,
but I think
some superstitions, silver does work on vampires. It also works on werewolves. It also works on fairies because it is such a pure metal.
That's funny. I never heard the fairies one. That's really fascinating.
Yes. Silver and iron are the two that really interact with the Fey world the best.
And there is some metaphysical truth to that. Of course, all superstitions and myths have their roots in some type of metaphysical archetypal reality. My students know this all too well. And so, yes, we do use silver. In fact, Sister Mary Jones' pectoral cross that she wears around her neck, she chose one that's pure silver. Mine is pure silver for the same reasons. My chain is the chain that holds the cross is silver because it does have a natural property that vibrates at a resonance that is very much problematic to the level of resonance that the demonic vibrates at. So we use it. And why not use every single thing that you can against these dark forces? Blessing might be enough, but why not use overkill? Because I don't think there's any such thing as overkill when you're dealing with the devil. So. Oh,
absolutely not. Take a sledgehammer to that fly. It doesn't matter.
Exactly. It's just like I said. When it's if you give a spirit an inch, they will always take a mile. This is especially true of demons. So I always say, give it back to them harder than they gave it to you. They come at you with a knife. You come at them with a machine gun. All right, come at them with a bazooka. Come at them with a nuclear bomb if you've got it. That's just the way you do it. You annihilate them. Don't give them any chance. So that's a little word about holy objects, and amulets, even in the pagan tradition, are very useful. Not quite as useful as the tools of the church, but useful nonetheless. And they can be charged in various ways using different metaphysical techniques. That can always, help. But I would say they're no substitute for the sacramentals of the church. And that's not my bias. I chose Christianity. Christianity did not choose me. I chose to be a Christian because of the power that is contained within the belief system.
And that was ultimately what did it for me, was because, I had been, my friends all looked at me as their high priestess. And then suddenly I come to them and say, "Oh, I'm Christian." And they're like, "Why are you doing that?" I said, "It's a higher form of magic."
Yeah. Yeah. And, it really is. I used to have some associations with Gnosticism when I was still working out my vocation. And one of the things you see sometimes in Gnostic circles is there is being an esoteric side. It has its conventional Christian side, and then there's this more metaphysical, somewhat even ceremonial magic side to some of these groups. And I know that when we were working out the formula in the church that I was a part of at the time, what we would do in terms of our ministry, they wanted to know, what things that they could study in ceremonial magic that could be we worked alongside their ministry. And my answer to them was, and I don't think it went over very well, you've got the mass. What more magic do you need or want? Even the words, hocus pocus, come from the Latin of "this is my body." Because when you say it in Latin and you don't understand Latin, you hear it fast, it actually sounds like the priest is saying hocus pocus.
Yeah.
That's where it comes from. No lie.
Yeah, it is.
And Sister Mary Joan mentions that the cross in Ogden that we used in that particular blessing for that unfortunate victim of that spirit contained a holy relic. It was actually... if you watch that episode, you'll see that there's it's almost like a monstrance, and it's not a monstrance, but it's a reliquary that is like looks like a mini monstrance, and there's a window in the center of the cross, and they didn't really show it on the episode, but what it is it's actually a fragment of the scalp from the severed head of John the Baptist.
Oh, wow.
So we were very fortunate to have that relic under our care in the Nicholean Catholic Church. And we do, in certain cases, bring out relics as, again, another defense against these dark forces to help us, and also have the physical presence of the saint. In this case, John the Baptist was there to help us in Ogden.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it is pretty awesome. We also have a relic of the True Cross, which we have pulled out a few times as well. But we have to be careful with relics, because if a person's really possessed, we don't want them to defile them in any way or even destroy them. So we have to be very careful when and how we use them. Number 3. Fear feeds all forms of attachment, so don't fall victim to it. This is a big one, folks. This is a big one, because the devil is not more powerful than you are, assuming you are a baptized Christian. Now, if you're not, then I have to say he could get the best of you if you come under his radar, because you don't have the grace of the cross to help you defeat it. Again, I don't want to sound too churchy, but some of this material lends itself to that, and I can't help it. It is just what it is, and I cannot teach anything less than the truth. And that is the absolute truth. So, assuming you are a baptized Christian, there is no demon, not even Lucifer himself, not even Satan and every minion under Satan is more powerful than you are. Because you have the cross. And the cross defeated him. It's done. It's over. It just has to be realized, kind of like what we were talking about before. So being fearful tends to be one of the greatest factors for making you vulnerable to an attachment. I know that when Demon House came out, which was a great documentary, by the way, I highly recommend it. I suggest anybody.
Absolutely stunning.
It is.
Yeah.
Great work. I think it's one of Zach's greatest works. But I get a lot of messages on Twitter when that was released. Is this safe to watch? Should I watch this? Is it dangerous? And I don't think people really understood or liked my answer. My answer that I gave was, if you're afraid of it, then yes, it's very dangerous to watch. But if you have confidence in your faith, then there's nothing that you ever need to worry about, ever. And I can't emphasize that enough. Fear feeds these things. Even the non-demonic. Fear can actually shine in the non-corporeal, like a medium in a way, but for different reasons. And fear will attract these things like flies to your barbecue. Trust me on this one. Always have confidence in your faith. Now, if you don't have faith, then wait for number 1, because the number 1 protection will answer that question for you. Anything that you want to mention about fear before we go on to 2, Joy?
Yeah, I really liked where you were talking about how it shines like a medium shines. And just imagine a medium that's afraid because they don't know what their abilities are. They just know that they're sensing something and they don't understand what it is. That's hard to get hold of, but it is possible. You don't have to be afraid. I can't say I've really experienced a lot of fear, but I have something wrong with my fear centers in my amygdala. So that's a neurological thing. So I don't really have a lot of fear per se, but I do get worried about some stuff. I get anxiety. I have a lot of anxiety to make up for the fact that I don't fear.
Yeah.
But they don't feed on that nearly as much, thank goodness. And just knowing how to get on top of that anxiety. But if you're feeling fear, then why are you doing it? Are you doing it to experience the adrenaline rush, to experience the fear even more? Because that really is it's giving them permission to come and make you more fearful.
I think a lot of them do. I think,
and of course, as a medium, all kinds of spirits are going to come to you. But if you're putting off fear, it's not going to be the nice ones that are coming to comfort you.
No, it won't be. It won't be. And fear definitely tracks on a negative level. Fear is a negative emotion, and it's going to attract on a lower scale. Getting back to that spectrum of vibration that we talked about. Yeah. And it's good science. Let me tell you, it's good science. It's not just metaphysical gibberish. It's good science.
It's a lot like, like when I was a kid, I got beat up a lot. So I was very fearful. So I got beat up even more.
Right.
Because that's what bullies are looking for. And that's what they are. They're bullies.
Yeah. Don't let them win.
Yeah.
And fear just gives them more to work with. It allows them to play you, manipulate you, and you don't want that. It's the last thing you want. And that's what they're really good at. So you take away fear, you take away their greatest asset. That automatically puts you in a better position. And people ask me all the time about, do you ever feel fear going into exorcisms? And never. Why do I have to fear? I mean, I've got the cross. The cross defeated Satan 2,000 years ago. I have reached that realization. I don't need to worry about it anymore. Doesn't mean I don't sin. Doesn't mean I still don't get attacked. I do from time to time. But, what's the worst they do? They knock out my coffee maker? They did, by the way. They, break my riding mower, smash my windshield. These are all things that demons have done.
Yeah.
Very common things.
And I have there's somebody in the chat room asking the difference between fear and anxiety. And I guess I could give a little neurological explanation. The fear centers and the anxiety centers are in the amygdalas, and you have a right amygdala and a left amygdala. And the fear centers are basically your fight or flight. You have a dangerous thing, to get away from that. You run away or you fight and then you get away. But anxiety is more being nervous, having stage fright, not being able to walk into a room filled with people sort of thing. And that, the left amygdala is where the anxiety centers are. And what it does, the purpose for it is it creates memories that are very vivid, because you need that, especially if you don't have a fear response. You need that in order to preserve your life. And so that's why, there's a difference between fear and anxiety, where anxiety is more about prevention and fear is more about immediacy, battling that right in front of you instead of just running away before you get in danger.
Well said. No, that's exactly it. I just want to mention my chat room has stopped scrolling. I don't know why, but I can't get it back. And
it's still scrolling for me.
Well, I'll have to depend upon you completely on here on out. So if you're sending me questions, I'm not seeing them, unfortunately, but Joy will. Okay, let's go with number 2. Now, this is something that's going to be kind of surprising, I think, to a lot of people that are not familiar with this. But it actually is one of the best things that you can do, which is why I put it so high up on the list. Remember, I'm ranking these in priority, and we're now reaching the 2 top ones. So number 2 is always pray for the dead. Always, always, always pray for the dead. Never go a day without offering prayers for the dead. Okay? I know for a fact that it helps them. And when you do this, you set up a relationship with the spiritual world. And I kind of hesitate to use that terminology because, again, it makes it sound like it's somewhere else, and it's not somewhere else. But that side of our reality that we are less connected to than we perhaps should be, it allows us to develop a relationship, even outside of the grace that it bestows on those who have died. And that is really, I would say, a more sophisticated version of the more ancient ancestor worship that our ancients used to do. I mean, that was really some of the the stuff of the most rudimentary forms of religion, what religion that we have today evolved out of. Ancestor worship was all part of that. We see it in Asia. We see it all over the world. And now we don't obviously worship our ancestors, but we should pray for them, not only for the bestowal of grace that we have, that we can cultivate and then give away to those who may need it, but also for the very sake of entering into relationship with the spiritual realm, which means that those of us who do this will be better protected when we are faced with encountering something from that side of existence. It's a wonderful practice to get into. Again, something that's fallen away as one of the things that the Protestant Reformation damaged the church with. And I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the Protestant Reformation. I have nothing against Protestants, but the Reformation, while it might have been, it might have had good intentions, the old adage of the road to hell is paved with good intentions was no more proven than it was there, because it did nothing but fracture the church over 33,000 times and left us with variations of Christianity that are barely recognizable. And one of the fundamental aspects of the Christian life was always to pray for the dead, and the benefits that can bestow to both you and them. And it does protect you. It really does. Even you might think it might not, but it does. And so I encourage it. You go to any Catholic Mass, there are prescribed prayers built into the Mass at every single Mass where the prayers are offered to the dead. Every single Mass. That's not by accident. That's because it's so important, and it needs to be done.
Yeah, and I've even gone so far, I do try to pray the hours, morning prayer, evening prayer. There's also a little office for the Blessed Virgin Mary, and that has all the hours, but then there's also an office for the dead. So it's praying for the dead and doing it on a regular basis. And I got that just because this is something that I'm not going to be able to avoid. Because I can't not go into this work now, as far as I've come. It's pretty obvious that this is something that I'm called to do. So I want to do the best that I possibly can. And to do that, I need to have the right prayer mindset. And praying for the dead is an essential part of that.
Yeah. It should be. It's in the divine office. It's everywhere. It's all throughout the framework of the prayer life of the Christian. So I highly encourage every one of you, regardless of whether or not, what denomination you practice, to do it. And if you're not Christian, it's not going to hurt you to do it anyway. It doesn't have to be done in a Christian context. It can just be done for the sake of the good work that it is. All right, so we have made it to number 1. Are you ready for this? Are we ready? All right. A little bit of fun there. Be fully initiated into an established religion that you seriously and consistently practice. Be fully initiated into an established religion that you sincerely, seriously, and consistently practice. Okay, there's a lot of terms there that I carefully selected to construct this number 1. And let's break it down a little bit. Be fully initiated. Okay, meaning if you are in the Christian, you need to be baptized. You can't just say, I'll take care of it. It's not some kind of symbolic thing that you do when you accept Jesus. Okay, that's not what it is. That's, again, more Protestant Reformation gibberish. It is a rite of initiation into the Christian life. So important that even Scripture says that it is necessary for salvation. Okay, That's how important it is. It has to be an established religion, because if you make it up or make it up as you go along, it's not going to have the archetypal consistency that can actually protect you against these things. And you're going to be outsmarted by them. You need to have the defense of an established ancient practice to draw from. And you have to be sincere with it. You have to be serious with it. And you have to be consistent with it. It's not sufficient to say, oh, I'll just go to church when it's convenient. I'll go to church when I feel like it. It does not work that way. Don't let your life and your family and everything else that goes on get in the way of your relationship to God. You can't put God last and expect him to put you first. It doesn't work like that. So if your life isn't going the way you want it to go, you need to take a long, hard look at why that is. And it likely has to do with the fact that God's probably very low on your priority list when you look at what you actually do. You might think you're putting him up pretty high, but you're actually not. And that doesn't matter. I say that also to the non-Christians. Your connection to divinity, whatever that is, has to be first in your life. If it comes even in second place, you are vulnerable. You are not as protected as you should or need to be. And you are now a target. And that's all I have to say about that. So that's the top 10. I did want to get to, before we even close out here, there was a message that I did promise, so we might go a little bit over 2 hours if that's okay. But I did get a message today on Facebook from an individual who asked me a question. And I'm going to pull it up here so I can read it on the air. And like I said, I promised him that I would answer it here on the air. But my computer is really not liking to cooperate right now. So let me see if I can make this work. Here we go. All right. And you know it's gone missing again. Isn't that bizarre? Here it is. It goes missing on me, and then it comes right back. Okay, here we go. So this was a message that came in on Facebook, a private message. Maybe it wasn't private. I'm not sure. This is what he says. His name is Brett. So this one's for you, Brett, if you're listening. 2 topics you should address are the topic of paranormal researchers using ghost boxes on YouTube and routinely getting responses of Satan, demon, and devil. They are also using the boxes in cemeteries where the responses are not only the same, but cries for help as well. And then they're being told to move and shut them off by the spirits they are contacting. They are also receiving physical attacks. What is going on? The second question is about the Dybbuk box craze, where people are opening them online for views. And so he wants me to comment on that as well. So let's take the first one. Okay. What is going on is that it goes back to archetypal resonance. Okay, so if you're going into cemeteries with paranormal equipment and trying to make contact with whatever you can get your hands on, well, the first thing, as soon as you punch a hole in that spiritual membrane, is going to be demonic. This is why angels don't come through on spirit SB7s and EVP. The reason you don't hear the higher spiritual beings is because you have to resonate at their level in order to reach them. And they're not going to play those games. Only lower spirits will. So typically the only things that are ever going to come through on paranormal equipment are going to be demons and lost souls in limbo. And that's about it. And typically neither one are very healthy for you to be contacting. So this is why they're getting these kind of responses. And the cries for help, well, let me tell you, limbo's quite terrifying. You want to try to avoid it if at all possible. So you want to make sure you die well. Another reason for the number 1 on my list. And so that answers that part of the question, hopefully.
Yeah, because that's one of the things that when I go out, like there's a place I love to go investigate. I haven't been forever, but whenever I go, I have them saying, we need help. It's dark. Where's the light? Things like that. So, I mean, and those are like you said, those are the people in limbo. They're in a state of decay where they don't even know where they are or what's going on. They just know it's dark and they want help. And it's really sad. It's heartbreaking to experience spirit after spirit saying those things. But I mean, they're part of the reason I do what I do as well, because they do need help, and they can have a resolution to an extent. Right. It's not one where they get to be themselves forever, but it is a resolution, and they don't have to be in that state anymore.
Well said. Now, the second part of the question, Joy and I discussed before the show, and we kind of laughed about this one. The Dybbuk box craze. Well, honestly, there's really only one Dybbuk box, and yes. Zach Bagans has it.
Exactly. They
make it seem like this is like a thing. Jewish rabbis are not routinely locking the Dybbukim in boxes or wine cabinets. Just for the hell of it. Okay, this is not standard Jewish practice. If you know anything about the history, he bought it on eBay or something, and everybody who owned it had all sorts of things happen, and he swore that it was haunted. He had a Jewish rabbi apparently lock it into the box successfully, and then he hid it away, and then eventually donated it to Zach's museum. Now, that one is very likely genuine. I have not seen it or encountered it or touched it, so I don't know for sure.
I think the story that I heard was that the woman who initially made it was going through a lot of horrific things. I think it was, the woman who crafted the box, I think there was some connection to Nazi Germany.
Yeah,
and
Holocaust survivor or something. On.
So when she was making it, it created an entity because of the sorrow and the horror that she had experienced. And that was what was associated with the box. And I think later the rabbi basically stuffed it in the box so that all of it's fit in there, and, close the doors and leave it.
Yeah. And I mean, that is something that one can do. I mean, we actually do that in certain types of, we call them containment boxes. We have actually a containment cabinet that would serve in very similar ways to this box, but we put cursed objects in it to contain them while we're preparing to deal with them. Like somebody sent us a cursed, what they believe to be a potentially haunted doll. And, we have a lot of cases that we have to work. We have limited time in which to work them. So it's staying in that cabinet until we're able to actually work the case and deal with it, and then talk to the owner to find out what she wants us to do with it after it's assessed to be one way or the other. But, these people that are doing them on YouTube it's fraudulent. Because there really aren't all these boxes out there that contain these spirits. A Dybbuk is a basically an unrested spirit of a deceased human being. We would call him in our system a wrathful spirit. But generally, if you help them move on, then they leave you alone. So even the idea of locking it in a box is kind of confusing to me, other than the fact that perhaps this rabbi was unable to successfully negotiate with it, which can happen from time to time. And I want to give him the best, benefit of the doubt. But, no, there's not a whole bunch of these out there. So these people that are opening them online, I haven't seen these videos. I'm not sure I even want to see these videos. It sounds really stupid to me. But it's nonsense. It's not releasing evil on the world. And in fact, a Dybbuk is not really even it's not really an evil spirit. It's an unrested spirit. that has attached itself to the object, in this case, the cabinet, and that's all that is. So, they can gain a lot of power and vengeance, and they can, as we know, wrathful spirits can behave like demons. But overall, you're not going to encounter one, and these guys opening on YouTube are just liars. So, unfortunately, that's all we have time for today, or tonight, or whatever it is for you guys out there. I know we have listeners from all over the world, and I'm so appreciative to all of you for that. Please keep tuning in, and if you can, support the show. We need your support in order to be able to do more and to be able to assure that it stays on the air. It is sponsored entirely by the Nicholean Catholic Church, and we need that support. We're grossly underfunded and not able to do everything that we need to do. Tune in next week. Joy and I will be here again on August 17th. That's a week from, well, I guess it's Saturday now where I am. But Friday, the 17th of August at 2:30 p.m., we will be back with a brand new edition of Vestiges of Christianity. Joy, thank you. I appreciate everything, all your input and your wisdom and knowledge that you've shared with our listeners tonight. And I want to thank all of you. Good night, everyone, and God bless.